Okay, everybody, welcome to the Town of Monroe Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for February 26, 2019. I'd like to open the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call.
Robert O'Neill.
Here.
Seth Bader.
Present.
Michael Murphy.
Here.
Peter Lewis.
Here.
Kevin Scully.
Here.
We have a full board this evening.
Thank you. Okay. That's good. Yes. One last administrative announcement before we begin. In case of an emergency, we have exits well marked to the door you came in out front. You can also go through the back corner past the kitchen down the back stairway and also through these doors out a side exit, just in case it's necessary. I think we'll be fine. Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, we'd like to start the meeting. The first matter we have tonight is a public hearing on the matter of the Gomez accessory apartment, Section 24, Block 1, Lot 68.27. If the applicants can step forward.
When you're ready for that.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm back. As if you don't remember, my name is David Nimakba. I'm the architect representing the project.
Excuse me, David. A motion needs to be made to open the public hearing first.
Oh, okay. Yes.
I move we open the public hearing on the Gomez matter. Second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So we're here to continue the process with the zoning board to entertain the public hearing. So we're ready to proceed with that.
For the sake of the people in the audience tonight, can you briefly review the application?
Sure.
Where the property is located, what action is being proposed, and also the variances that are being sought?
Absolutely. So the property is located on Country Court, and it's right on the corner of Country Court and Harriman Heights Road. The application is for an accessory apartment. In this particular case, it's for the parents of the owner, Karina Gomez. They have created an apartment within the building, or within the house, to accommodate the parents. We've been before the planning board for several meetings. We've gone through a vigorous examination by them regarding the engineering and the requirements needed to meet an accessory apartment. To date, we've met all of those requirements. Some of them consist of a maximum square footage of 750 square feet. The owner occupies the house. The footprint of the house is not changing. It's remaining the way it is. We would have to do some exterior or site modifications to increase the driveway to accommodate the cars, and that's per the zoning code, not necessarily a need of the family. We meet the sewer requirements, water requirements, and after all of those meetings, the planning board had referred the project to the zoning board. Since the area of the lot, even though it's in a 1 acre zoning, does not meet the square footage. The area of the lot is brought out in the public hearing is 40,779 square feet. A 1 acre lot is 43,560. So we are requesting the board to accept or approve that variance. And what that means is we're just asking the board to acknowledge the fact that this square footage satisfies that requirement. The second variance is an area variance of lot coverage. The zoning code allows 15%. Because of these minor improvements, we would need an 18% lot coverage.
Okay. Okay, David, thank you for the introduction and summary of the project. At this point, I would open up the floor to anybody in the public. Are there any comments or questions? If you would, please come forward, state your name and address.
My name is John Patrici. I live at 22 Post Road in the area of 12 Country Court.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Bring the microphone down.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
At first, I'm glad the architect explained a little bit about the square footage issue, because I wasn't entirely clear about it from having read the letter that was sent, the certified letter. First of all, how did this issue regarding the square footage arise?
I could explain that, actually. The town of Monroe in 2017 updated their zoning code, and what used to be a 40,000 square foot lot requirement, kind of referred to as a builder's acre,
Right.
was changed to a full acre, 43,560 square feet.
Oh.
So this lot falls above the 40,000, but below the 43,560. So, and this is an issue that impacts all the lots throughout the town of Monroe. Anybody who's got a lot that falls in that category is going to probably be coming to the ZBA for variances.
I see. Okay, and then regarding the second variance that's being sought, is the variance for an accessory apartment? Or what
Well,
is
the
variance?
accessory apartment is the request that caused the application to occur. The variance itself, the accessory apartment is an allowed use throughout the town of Monroe, and certainly in this zone. The variance that's being requested for lot coverage was that within the zoning, again, the code calls for 15% maximum lot coverage. That number was actually reduced from what it used to be. And because they're trying to meet the town requirement for accessory apartment, one of the things is you need 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit, 2 parking spaces for the main unit and 2 parking spaces for the accessory unit. So all they're really doing is building out a 400 square foot parking area that's 20 foot by 20 foot.
Mm-hmm.
So that increases their degree of nonconformance with the lot coverage.
The other issue is, one of the specifications of an accessory apartment is it has to be within a conforming structure. So the primary dwelling that it's accessory to has to be conforming. So because of as Mike had mentioned, because of the changes in the code, this became a non-conforming structure, which is why now, in order for the accessory apartment, I guess, to be approved, we have to issue or make a decision on a variance of the primary dwelling.
So the variance is not for an accessory apartment?
No,
Well, so anyone is entitled to build an accessory apartment?
by going through the application process, you need to go to the planning board to get your accessory apartment approved. You would have to go to the building department to get the architectural plans approved for the interior renovations. That's one of the other things with an accessory apartment. It cannot expand or enlarge the footprint of the building, so it has to be built within the existing structure, which this application complies with. And then in an instance where if you don't meet all the zoning codes, then you have to come to the ZBA. So you have to see 3 different town departments or authorities before you can even get approval on it.
I see. Now, so I thought I read somewhere there is no CO for that accessory apartment? She's looking for, Karina Gomez is looking for a CO?
Yes, they have to have the approvals to have the accessory apartment before the building department can issue them a CO for it.
Or make a decision on it, yeah. I mean, ultimately, if a variance was granted, that would then allow the next step to take place, where the building inspector would then perform an inspection or have certain specifications of that accessory apartment in order to issue a CO. It doesn't, an issuance of a variance doesn't guarantee or ensure a CO given for the accessory apartment.
Oh, I see. I thought that before she even finished building the accessory apartment, would have needed a CO, or,
Well, you
know.
need a permit, actually.
You
There is
need
a
a
little bit
permit.
of-
Yeah.
little- This is a little bit backwards, that
Yeah.
officially you're supposed to request a permit, so, isn't that's correct, right?
This
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah.
The mother lives there. The apartment was created. This is one step in the process that we're going through to try to clarify and get everything brought up to code.
Okay.
Right, and if I'm not mistaken, the accessory apartment only runs with the current owner. Once the home gets sold, if a future owner wants
Clock
to,
starts on 10 years again.
if the future owner wants to exercise their right for the accessory apartment, they have to go through the whole planning process all over again.
And also, it's subject to a yearly inspection and
Yep.
update by the building inspector.
Okay,
Do you-
so,
Do you have concerns about
well, some of my concerns have been alleviated in the fact that, the house is not going to be enlarged any further, right? You explained to me that the apartment, that we're not looking for a variance to build, to build the apartment.
Right.
I thought it was built illegally, that, if, let's say, I decide I want to move my mother-in-law into our house and give her own little private quarters, I can just build right over my garage, put it in a kitchen, and in a bathroom, and it seems like I could do that, provided I just go before the planning board, and it seems like it's pretty routine. I mean,
Yes.
okay.
That's correct, and that's exactly why the town kind of instituted this law. I think it's probably 15, 20 years ago now, that, they wanted to make it possible for seniors who own homes here in the town to age in place, and also for situations like that, bringing in in-laws or other family members, or, and it can also be an outside the family person, because that way, if you have a retired couple, they don't need their full house, they can rent a room with a kitchenette to somebody. It helps them cover the cost of their annual taxes and maintenance on their property.
Oh,
So
okay.
that has been a law in the town of Monroe. I have to look back and check, but it's like 15, 20 years it's been on the books.
Okay, so once the house is sold, the new owner can rent out that apartment.
No, the new owner would have to get approval all over again
Approval for?
for the accessory apartment, for the future use of the accessory apartment.
but would they be precluded from renting that out?
Until they got their own approval for that accessory apartment, yeah.
Yes.
They have to get a new CO basically for that, to allow them to rent it.
Oh, okay.
And then there's a
Okay.
continuing duty apparently in the code. Every year there has to be a renewal by the building inspector. So it's a continual review process, really.
It's not a permanent thing.
Right.
The CO, from my understanding, is an annual renewal upon inspection, right?
I believe so. I think the code mentions that it would be, the owner is obligated to reapply, make certain statements that he still owns and occupies the residence and things of that nature. And then he looks for the renewal of the CO.
So, one of the questions procedurally, is this going back in front of the planning board?
Yes.
Following
Yes.
our decision? Right? And then they'll evaluate all the factors that we're kind of discussing.
Yeah.
Right? They'll evaluate the square footage, they'll evaluate the,
I'm sorry, Seth.
no, you can fill in anything.
We satisfied all the technical requirements, so we're at a point of comfortability with the project. So now, once the zoning board renders their decision, and a favorable one, then we'll be able to go back to the planning board, finalize that process,
And then go to the inspector with it.
and then we have to go to the building inspector, and then submit the architectural plans.
So does that, I guess, address some of the reservations that you had?
Well, okay, so what would be the procedure for the new owner again? What would he have to do? He would have to go to the planning board again?
Transfer title,
Or
man.
what would he have to do?
For a new owner?
For a new owner, yeah.
Yeah, they'd have to reapply to get it. Well, you have to go to the building inspector, I think.
Yeah, he's reading code.
So there were, this was a very hot topic within the, the new zoning code being put together, the new planning code. One of the concerns shared by a lot of citizens was the ability for people to build a secondary dwelling outside of the footprint of the home,
Right.
right?
Right.
And turn single-family lots into, multi-family lots. So there were some parameters put in place to control housing density and things like that. One of them addressed things that it had to be built within the actual footprint of the house.
I see.
The other was the ownership of the house. So that was one of the things, David, and I know that that's probably within the planning board's purview to evaluate, was how many years. There's something I'm reading here that says that the house.
Decision, that was not this one.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I retract.
Yeah, that's right.
But the years of ownership of the property, that it has to be owner occupied in addition
Okay.
to it, right?
Okay, so
there
it
was
does
a lot
have
of,
to be
there was a lot of
owner-occupied.
teeth put to the code to make sure, it closed a lot of the loopholes or concerns for things to be abused.
Okay, so it does have to be owner-occupied, and the apartment can be rented out to a non-family
Yes.
member. I would think that getting the, going through the process yearly, probably pretty much be a rubber stamp kind of a thing. I mean, barring any obvious code violations.
Correct.
Or complaints,
Yeah.
If there was a problem, people would bring it up and the building inspector would, it's subject to inspection, so.
I see. I see.
But one of the reasons it goes to the planning board too, besides all those other things, is, you're expanding the number of occupants in the house. You want to make sure there's enough water, enough, sewer capacity or septic capacity. That's one of the things the planning board reviewed. So that's why it has to come up in front of the planning board.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that answered a lot of my questions. It's just now, it's like, well, everybody can do it. And
Yes.
it's perfectly
Well, they can do it, but they have to
okay.
get the approvals and,
Right.
obviously comply with the laws.
And
One of the things I heard you said was, you had a feeling that something was done, illegally. But I don't know if that
Well,
was.
only because I saw in some of the paperwork that I read, maybe it was the application, that she's looking for a CO. And to me, right away, it's like, if you don't get a CO, you can't sell your house.
Right.
In the first place, I thought you were supposed to get a CO before you even completed the job,
Right, so I
So-
think,
At the end of completion.
Yeah.
or at the
That's
end of
at the
completion.
end of the process.
Right.
but I believe, procedurally, right, the correct way is the permits are filed prior to construction.
Mhm.
There's an inspection process that takes throughout the construction, and then at the completion, a final inspection, and then a CO would be issued. So, yes, to comment on whether this was done the correct way, it wasn't.
Right.
You don't normally seek building permits after the construction is done. So, that's...
Well, I'm not sure I understand that part of it. She's seeking permits to build after the construction was done?
It's almost, and David, you can comment, I don't want to speak on behalf of your client, but my understanding of it is that in order for a CO to be issued, there's a process,
Mhm.
right? That the building inspector kind of has to work backwards. The normal process would be submitting plans to his department, following the plans, following an inspection schedule, as the phases of construction are completed for those plans. And then once everything's been satisfied along the way, the building inspector would issue a CO. So because things have been done already, there's an inspection and things, will have to be done, I'm sure, within his department to satisfy him in order to issue a CO. In order
But
for
the
it to
permits
first
were-
reach
Yeah.
his
Well, they-
department is why it's in front of us, right? Because in order for plans for an accessory apartment to reach his department, his client needs to go in front of the planning board in order for it to be first seen by the planning board, or I guess for the planning board to reach their final conclusions, they have to have a variance issued by our board. So that's why it's, to, I guess, give the whole picture why it's in front of us.
So there was a risk, they built without the permits, right? The risk was that the planning board would say, this isn't up to snuff, and you'd have to,
So they built without the necessary approvals.
right. But if it didn't pass, if they didn't meet it retroactively, they would have to remove the accessory apartment.
Right.
So it's a risk. They
Yeah.
took a
Yeah, the
risk.
construction is out of sequence from the,
Right.
I don't
Permitting and
understand
approval
why that was
process.
done. Why would anybody want to take a risk like that?
well, some people get ahead of themselves in the process, they build it first and then ask permission later, and
They'll build the deck and go, oh boy, I need a permit.
You see it with decks
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, yes, that's.
And that's how those applicants end up here before the ZBA oftentimes, because they put themselves in a bit of a jam. Just to clarify for you, Mr. Patrici, this complies with section 5744 of the town code. It's supplemental standards for certain uses, accessory apartments, and there's 5 pages of conditions that need to be met regarding occupancy by the primary owner of the land. He's got to be one of the occupants of the building. How big the accessory apartment can be no more than 30% of the overall building size, can't be less than a certain square footage, can't be more than another square footage. And those are all of the criteria that this application has to meet in order for, this board, the planning board, and the building department all to say, yes, you're okay.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the construction was done out of sequence here, so they're here trying to correct the record.
Right. Can I get a copy of those 5 pages?
Sure, I mean, it's
If you want to
also,
leave your email, I can email it to you tomorrow.
yeah.
Sure.
So Mr. Patrici, right?
Yes.
So the purpose of a public hearing, that's why it's utilized during this process, is there's a variance that's being sought to the code, right? Because as we stated, there are 2 factors of the bulk requirements for this property that the property is currently non-conforming to. And in order for these other things to move along in their process, we have to first make a decision on whether a variance or relief will be given against the fact that it's not conforming to those bulk requirements. The
I see.
purpose of a public hearing is for us to hear commentary from the public for or against the proposal of what is in front of us. So and I know David has long said, even though we're technically only evaluating 2 things here, it's not in a vacuum from all the other factors,
Right.
right? Things like the impact to the overall look and feel of the neighborhood
Right.
is one element that we would evaluate as a board. So the purpose, or what's helpful and useful in public commentary, is your opinions of the subject property, right? For
Right.
or against.
Right.
So do you have anything specific or relevant to that particular property?
No. I mean, this was a learning process for me. I saw in the letter the word 2-family dwelling, and right away I'm thinking, are they looking for a zoning variance to create a 2-family house? Because that would be a definite concern of mine.
Meaning another physical structure being built, or within the, if you could, I don't want to give you words, but expand upon why that would be.
Maybe like creating a huge kind of a house, like with, almost like
turning it
garden
into a
apartment
duplex.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Correct. But, as Seth mentioned, part of our responsibility is to ask the questions that we're asking, is to say, here's the neighborhood. Does this drastically change? Does it not fit with the neighborhood? Does it drastically change the neighborhood? Is it any,
Right.
issues like that of it, evident? But, so those are the things we're asking, with a public hearing.
Well, it doesn't, based upon what you said, it's got to be in the same footprint. I mean, the house isn't getting any larger, right? They just built over the garage, I guess, and so they kept the same size house, or I don't know how they built an accessory apartment without it increasing the overall size, unless they built over something.
Could you comment on that, please?
Sure. Several years ago, they received a permit to add an addition onto the house. That's the addition, that's the part of the house you see to the left of the permit. So that addition was built and actually approved. So after that process, they created an area in that addition for the mother and father to live.
I see, I see.
So from purely a construction standpoint, that portion of the house is approved.
Right,
And a C of O was issued
right.
for the construction.
The construction.
Right now, we're talking about the use of that area.
Right. Neil, can they build a separate entrance and that kind of thing, right? I guess right now, there's just the one entrance into the house, so that the mother of the owner or whomever has to go in through the main entrance to the house. But at some point, I mean, can they build like a completely separate entrance, or?
No, the footprint of the house will not change.
Right. Okay, so stairs or a door
Is considered
is considered a change of footprint?
Well, and if you're adding additional square footage would be a change to the footprint.
the impervious surface is considered.
David, you have the floor
altercation.
plan there with you?
An
Maybe
alteration
that will help
to-
explain it to Mr. Patrice?
I'm sorry, I didn't
Just
know.
lot coverage. That would just be lot coverage.
Which is, because it's expanding the footprint, right? Is
Yeah,
that
but I was
what I'm
saying of the building, you got.
Yeah, but
Yeah, you got
Patrice is
expanding the
asking
building
just adding a
and-
door
Right.
is something that they could.
No, a door is within the building department
Right.
jurisdiction.
So creating a separate entrance
Well,
without increasing the
It sorta
size
has
of
a
the
Is your
separate
concern
entrance.
that they would potentially be putting in like new stairways and things like that out on the outside of the house?
Maybe, David, if you could show him the
Yeah,
floor
I
plan,
think
that'll
I think
answer
the
some
project's
questions.
starting to evolve into a monster that doesn't exist.
I have
You know,
questions,
that-
legitimate questions, I'm sorry.
That's why we're here tonight.
Yeah.
This is the area of the house that's being considered for an accessory apartment. This area of the house is right there. So, I mean, just so everybody notes, it's right on the left side of the main entrance.
Okay.
On the west.
Right, in order to access the accessory apartment, you're going through the main door.
No, there's a door in the back. There's an existing door right there.
Okay, okay.
And that goes into a wash, well, that door leads into an area that has a separate door leading here and another door going to an existing wash and dryer room.
Okay. And is there a limitation to the number of people or occupants you can have in?
I believe there's something within the accessory code for that. Mike, you have it in front of you, I know it's 5 pages, but
Yeah, let me see if I can.
I do have a recollection of occupancy.
Okay, I mean, obviously I don't want like 20, illegal immigrants living there and, I mean. Yes.
Excuse me, to speak in a public hearing, you have to come before the board, register. Well, you'll get your turn, absolutely. 10 years.
I mean, there was a house at the corner of Post Road and Pine Tree Road where, it was, I don't know, many, many, many people living there. And it just,
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's obviously, I mean,
That's
it's a concern,
Yeah.
but, I guess there's a question if there's limits to how many people can be living in a house, but I don't know that that's our purview,
I mean, when they go to the planning board again, there may be a separate limitation there, but they say, okay, how many people how much is the population of this house going to increase? In this case, it's 2. And they go through all the calculations and say, okay, this is when the planning board's looking at it. There's this much flow per person, this much wastewater per person, this much water needs per person, and they go through the whole process to make sure there's enough water, there's enough sewer or septic capacity. So that's part of part of the approval process.
I'm
for
looking to
doing
see
this.
there's no specific number on the number of people.
Okay.
But that would be, it's built for, just like a new build. There's a certain amount of people per household that the planning is done around.
Right. And you did say that the owner has to occupy the
Yes,
house, he can't.
that's one of the primary conditions of the accessory dwelling.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Patrice.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Good questions.
You want to put your email address, I can get you those 5 pages.
Excuse me, we had another person with some questions.
like to come in
Please
and-
come forward and let
I'll
us
have
know
you
who
sign
you
this
are.
page, and then you can sit down and ask your questions. Okay, I'll get that out to you tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
If you just want to, paper's not moving here. Just print your name underneath there for me, please. And then you can just sit down at the table and address the board. His name is David. And
Yeah.
Good
Hi.
evening, sir.
Good evening. My name's David Eng. I live in 247 Harriman Heights Road, right across the street.
Okay.
So, my main concern is that this will encourage more people to, try to get rental income, and it'll bring more transient, people into our neighborhood, and it'll create, more issues for us. So,
Well, as I mentioned, this has been a law that's been on the books in the town of Monroe for 15, 20 years now. We actually don't see as many applications as you would expect. There's, what does the planning board see, maybe half a dozen a year of this type of application? So, we don't think that the law is being abused within the town of Monroe. And actually, back in 2017, when there was a zoning code update, they really did expand that portion of the code right to the full 5 pages to put limitations on it so that it can't be bigger than so much, it can't be smaller than such and such, and just, all of these conditions just to kind of box it in a little bit so that it doesn't result in rampant growth throughout the community. In this case, we're talking about 750 square feet. Well, how many additional people are going to live in 750 square feet? You got to be, reasonable about it. It's probably going to be 1, 2 people, 3 people maybe if there's a baby involved, So something like that is what usually comes out of these accessory apartment applications.
And also, paragraph J limits the use of that 750 square feet. It says each dwelling unit in structure shall contain its own separate and independent bathroom and kitchen entirely located within the dwelling unit, and the accessory apartment shall contain no more than 1 bedroom and no other space. So it's really limiting the amount of rooms within that 750
I
square
think
feet.
your concerns, they're valid. And that's, if there was a redo of the master code of the zoning laws a few years back to try to put conditions and things, and it's all public information. So I would welcome you to, if you choose to want to look through it, if you're concerned about some specific issue, and then these kind of meetings and, planning board meetings are where you would express as a citizen any concerns you might have.
yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
So, if I could ask you a question.
Yeah.
Again, I understand the concern over setting precedent or possibly setting precedent.
Yeah.
But as it relates specific to this property, right, and its current use or its current use, are there any reservations for or against its current use?
Yeah. Well,
Essentially, to call what it is,
yeah.
they're seeking, as we illustrated, this approval process after the fact, which is not the correct way to go about it. But it's not, to my understanding, and I think what was explained, it's not like this is being constructed and now additional people are moving into the unit. This is trying to remedy a situation that maybe wasn't done correctly in the first place. That has been happening. It's in there. So the volume of people, the number of cars that are being utilized within that cul-de-sac, that are parked within the cul-de-sac or on the driveway, the overall impact of the neighborhood. Do you have any specific commentary on?
As far as I know the property was on the market for quite some time, right? Yeah, so, I mean, there's not much to say about that, but, I mean, if you're trying to sell, but maybe they change their mind and they want to stay instead, or...
Yeah, we're trying to go through this process to get everything all cleared up.
Okay. Well, just as a neighbor, you know, it's just my opinion. I don't think it'd be great, but, you know, that's all. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate it.
You're
Pleasure.
you're welcome.
Bye.
Thanks for coming out tonight on such a cold night. Okay, I guess there are no other comments from the public. I'd like to open it up to the board for any further discussion.
I just have a question for the architect. I see that there's going to be a proposed addition of 20 foot by 20 foot impervious surface, the asphalt area.
Yes.
Was there any consideration or any discussion maybe with the building inspector if you used a pervious surface like block or grasscrete? You could basically apply for less of an area variance with respect to lot coverage?
No. There's been no discussion.
Well, actually there was. I brought that up at the last
I
meeting.
think we talked about that last time.
We talked about it the last time.
He asked that with the building department.
Usually
I'm
the
not talking about with
building
zoning
inspector
board.
discuss.
Well, yeah, but I mean, just to say,
I can't really commit to that because we're going back to the planning board. So, you know, I have to take these comments.
well, that might be one of the recommendations of this board.
Well, that's fine.
Huh?
Yeah.
The, well, we're talking about the site and the impacts. I did go out there, drove past the site and looked at it. There are some mature trees standing in that location, so I think there's going to be a number of trees removed in order to build that additional parking space. You know, they're all well within the bounds of the property, but, you know, I just wanted to recognize that fact that there is going to be some site disturbance out there in order to build that additional parking area. It's not being placed over existing lawn. It's more a mix of large trees out there.
You know, with the planning board's approval, we have no problem sliding that down the driveway towards the east, towards the easterly direction of the driveway.
Well, I don't want to say where to put it. I mean, my preference is to keep it more internal to the lot, so it's less of an impact to the neighbors, but it's kind of a balancing act. What's more of an impact, taking out trees or moving the parking closer?
Yeah.
What could be the alternative to an asphalt?
You can do pervious pavers, you can do pervious asphalt, there's actually such a thing. You can do pervious concrete. We've recommended that to applicants in the past.
But it doesn't change the appearance of...
No, not necessarily changes the appearance, but it changes the drainage characteristics of it. Rather than water running off and flowing down the driveway into the street, the water will, you know, soak into the ground and you know, dissipate below grade.
I just asked the question because in some towns...
Counselor, can you speak into your mic?
Yes.
Lower your microphone so you speak into it. Thank you.
The reason why I asked the question is because sometimes there's a calculation on the amount of variance you're seeking. Because they say if you use a pervious surface, they'll give you a 50% reduction. So, and as a zoning board, we try to grant the minimum variance that we can to accomplish a project.
Yeah.
So I just was wondering if that was an issue, but correct. This could be something that the planning board would take up and deal with.
I wouldn't see a problem with you making that recommendation along with your approval.
Because that wouldn't be unprecedented. We've done that before, just last year with that property on Scunnamunk,
Yeah.
I believe it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, you just try to the extent you can,
right.
keep the recharge of the groundwater out, less runoff.
Yeah.
And this is a planning board requirement on those additional spaces? Because it has to, I
No,
understand it has to-
it's in the code.
Right,
It's
but it
in-
has to accommodate 2 additional cars, right? Or
Right.
2 cars per dwelling. So I'm just looking at the plan and just looking at the size of the cars that are illustrated on it. Like, is it necessary to do that? I mean, I can line 4 cars up on this driveway.
I think it's so you can
You can
K-turn
maneuver.
out of it.
Yeah.
That's part of it, so you're not backing out of your driveway onto the road.
Right, but if this wasn't being used with an accessory dwelling, it wouldn't be required to have that turnaround there, and it would still be utilized.
They could have it if they wanted to, I guess.
I guess I'm trying to understand what's the need, and I don't want to step on the planning board to tell them that they're requiring it, but obviously that, as Michael says, you know, that cuts down on possibly the need for removing trees, right, creating more pervious or even impervious surface. It minimizes the variance being sought, right, because the lot coverage right now is based on that, utilizing that calculation. I just...
My understanding is that the parking is required because the occupancy is going to be increased in the dwellings, and they have to have sufficient parking on the lot for the increased number of residents, and there's also a town requirement that you're able to perform turns on the property as opposed to backing out into the public
Right.
street.
I guess I understand.
And that's true, and the reality is we have many lots in this town where you cannot do anything else but back out of your property. And this one is on a dead-end cul-de-sac. It's a small cul-de-sac.
Right.
There might be, 5 houses on it?
Yeah.
So it's, as far as a traffic safety hazard, that's pretty minimal. But, I mean, just from the user's point of view, trying to, use the lot, if you got 4 cars all queued up, every time somebody's got to move, you're moving cars around.
But my point is, it's happening anyway. Right, but
Yeah.
this isn't a double wide driveway, so those two guys are moving their cars anyway.
That mostly happens with older construction too, though,
Yeah.
where that wasn't the rule
Right.
back then. So the driveway just led to this little one-car garage, and that was that. Now, with newer construction,
Yeah, it seems like it's being made part of the plans just because we are increasing the dwelling amount of persons in the home. So
Yeah.
it's a requirement.
I mean,
They don't need it.
Right,
We
it's-
denied
They
one
don't need it.
application recently because they could not provide the additional parking,
Exactly.
And for several other reasons but that was one of the things, is that, here you can provide the additional parking. I think it makes sense to put it in. If you put it in as permeable pavers of some type, then it's less of an impact. Probably if you took that parking area, moved it to the east, 10 feet further on the lot, you can have 4 proper parking spaces without blocking in any cars. The way it's set up now, you can't use the top end of the driveway for parking because you'd be blocking those 2 side units. But if you pulled it back 10 feet closer to the roadway, you would open the end of the driveway up to 2 parking spaces plus the 2 parking spaces in the new layout there.
But now, those decisions are the planning board's.
Correct.
Well, yeah, it's planning board, but I mean, if we see it, we can, recommend it, right? It could be part of our recommendation to the planning board. If, we find our way clear to granting a variance for the area issue,
Right.
we can say yes, but with, certain conditions.
Right, and with the suggesting things like permeable pavement or not making an impervious surface, it's a way of mitigating the variance. We're at
Yeah.
18 instead of 15.
Right.
We're not, I don't think we actually have a deduction, but we do mitigate things sometimes, and that would be one of the ways we do that.
I think that would be more along the lines of a suggestion from our
Right.
board, because we really can't step on the toes of the planning board
Right,
on
right.
these type of issues
Right.
or other boards.
Yeah. Now, if that 20 by 20 was not, what would that change in the lot coverage?
Close to 3%.
So it'd be.
Actually, I think it was-
It's like 1%.
it's 1%.
Because it's 400 feet on
I
40,000.
think 2% was already over because of the
shed.
acreage
So it would be
thing.
a slight reduction in that.
Did that happen because of the change in zoning too? Because part of the change in zoning in 2017 was reducing all the lot coverages. So that might have been part of the impact here, that the lot coverage got reduced to 15% after the fact. Because the
Right,
new,
it's not the 400 square foot
Yeah.
that's throwing this thing outside, it's
The
No.
change in-
it's the change in the code.
change in the code, yeah. I mean, but the 400 square foot just adds another percent to it,
Right.
that's all. I mean, so the variances they're looking for here are very minor. I think, if we make some recommendations for other improvements to it as mitigating factors.
I'm in favor of that. I'll start the process.
Well, go through the list of, I have a copy of these questions if you,
Do we keep the public hearing open at this point?
I know you close the public hearing, and we
Close
can
public
move on to deliberation.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you need a copy, just a copy of the town law.
Are there any other comments from the public?
Okay, if there are no other comments from members of the public, I'd like to open the floor to a motion to close the public hearing.
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So done. Public hearing is closed.
Oh,
Okay.
Please stay if they want.
You guys don't want to miss the finale?
You guys actually can stay if you want. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you have to leave in the post.
I didn't listen.
I think they think we voted.
Okay, right.
Okay, so continuing with the discussions on this application, I think we just covered a couple of topics that make sense as far as recommendations to the planning board should we, find to approve the variances, the two variances that are being sought. In my opinion, the two variances that are being sought are, number one, they're not self-inflicted. The impervious area was reduced when the zoning code changed. Same thing for the lot area. The degree of nonconformance is also fairly minimal. I don't know what the board members' thoughts are.
I agree.
Yeah, I concur with that assessment.
concur with that.
Well, the subject of self-inflicted. Yes,
Yeah, it's partially, I
right,
could say.
the need why we had to evaluate conforming and non-conforming was because the accessory apartment was built, which was the decision of they wouldn't need to seek a variance unless, if they did not build an accessory apartment. Am I correct in that statement, you think?
Yes, that's correct.
So, I mean, it's,
Was that by a previous owner?
No, this was all by the current owner. I think this owner has owned the property since
Well, why would they not need a
2013?
variance?
Because it was originally.
Wouldn't they still need to have those two parking spots put in there? If they went through the correct, no steps are being skipped. They're just being kind of done out of order.
the spots are required because there's an accessory apartment. Saying if there was no accessory. if they
Oh,
not
there was
put
no
it-
accessory apartment at all?
Okay.
Okay, I understand. Okay. I thought you were talking because they went out of order.
It was sold
Oh,
within,
no, no.
it was originally
Okay.
purchased in 2013. And then 2016,
The fact that the lot is
sold within the family. I guess they just
Okay,
bought
that-
the house.
yeah.
The deed.
Because
Not
it's zoning
zoning,
change.
right, that's because of the zoning change.
Okay.
Now, I guess that gets to the question of, is this house up for sale? One of the members of the public mentioned that the house was up for sale.
I don't know the current status. It was going back and forth. They didn't know what their financial situation was. Then they're staying. In either case, they have to correct this and remove whatever violations, go through the process to get it approved. So they are there, and they want to get this done.
I guess what I like to know is the chronology of events, what happens with these things. When was it, if it was built before the applications were sought, when was that done? Was it just recently done, or was it done, back in 2013 when they first bought the house?
2014?
13.
No, they bought, I had from my notes from last time.
All right.
Moved it in 2013, renovated 2014.
Oh, they renovated in 2014.
Right, the addition David mentioned.
Oh,
Oh, maybe that was the addition, okay.
Well, that was the addition, and within that addition,
went the,
They created an accessory dwelling. I think.
All right, so that's the timeline. Then, for whatever reason, they ended up in front of the building inspector asking for a CO.
Yes.
Because they're getting ready to sell, or just because they want to correct this? I don't know that that's our business.
I don't think it really matters.
Yeah.
And none of us have the answer to it either.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So is there any other further conversation? Questions
Wanna
about
review
this?
each of the 5 questions?
Do
I
the
guess
5
you can have
factors.
Yeah, okay.
comment on it?
Yeah, I think we have to have that in the record.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Just give it to me and I lost it. It's on the desk.
Another copy?
No, I should have a copy. It's here. Here we go. Okay, so the 5 questions we have to consider is whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance.
Say no.
I say no.
And the reason why I say that is, and I know one of the citizens, raised the concern over, well, what happens if it changes hands? The new inhabitants, if they're, if they're abusing it, and it's, that's why I wanted to press from him, like, what's his opinion of the current use of the property, right?
Right.
Of, are there parking or traffic concerns? Are there noise concerns? Are there, and he didn't share any of those. And I'm comfortable in the sense that, especially for the accessory apartments, that it's an ongoing. So even if we played out possible scenarios, if it changed hands with the new owners, those new owners are going to have to each year undergo a review process.
Right.
That kind of mitigates any. So I think what we're evaluating is its current use, its current inhabitants, right? Is it posing any detriment to the character, to the character of the neighbor, in my opinion, because it remained inside the footprint of the house? It's not changing the look of the neighborhood. I don't think there's any adverse effects to the overall use of the neighborhood as a result. I drove by there, and there today there was only one car on the driveway, different than some previous applicants where I've seen cars lined up down in the entire very narrow street. This was a wide cul-de-sac with only one car on the driveway. So my opinion is no, I don't see an undesirable change producing the character of the neighborhood. That's just my opinion.
Right, and also to your point, once this applicant goes through this process, it puts the conditions of this existing accessory dwelling on the books at the town hall, so that the building inspector knows that there's got to be this annual review. If that hasn't been occurring in the past, which it probably has not,
Right.
then, that way that will carry on in the future.
Right.
Okay, whether the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance.
No.
I think, as we mentioned earlier, both variances are really due to a change in the local town law and the zoning bulk requirements. Whether the requested area variance is substantial.
Say no.
I say no to that.
Concur. Whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical environment, conditions in the neighborhood or district.
No.
No.
And whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the Board of Appeals, but shall not necessarily preclude it from granting the area variance.
So I'm of the belief it was self-created.
It was self-created.
But as it states, it doesn't necessarily preclude the granting of the variance.
All right. So, having gone through the 5 conditions, would anybody like to make a motion for the approval of the 2 area variances being sought and any recommendations to the planning board?
So So I would, I looked at it, but I'm trying to draw from memory. You raised the concern over some of the mature trees that are there currently. Yeah, I'd like to see if it's necessary as a requirement of a planning board for these additional parking spots to be done in a way that has the least amount of impact to the character of the neighborhood, as well as those trees. So if it means moving it slightly, if it means using some form of surface that will prevent any
permanent.
damage to the trees, that would be my only, that just caution or care or concern is being made towards those two factors when deciding the location of it.
So is there a difference between, there's times when we grant a variance, but there's conditions. It's like, you got to do this, and then it sounds like we were also making some recommendations or requests to the planning board to consider other options.
Yeah, the way I would do it with this particular application is to indicate that you are granting the variance or the variances, but that you are making not directives but suggestions to the planning board, that you're looking at the plans and these are our suggestions. Now, there might be very legitimate planning reasons why your suggestions are not going to be implemented, but I don't want to see that affect the ZBA decision and resolution that you're making.
Right. I think it's some of the applications that we've done in the past where we do apply conditions, it's something that's not going to the planning board.
Right.
It's something that kind of goes to the building department and, then out the door.
Right. I was just trying to make the distinction.
So, yeah, I mean, to be more specific about it, I think that the planning board should look at the opportunity to shift the two new proposed parking spaces towards the road by 10 feet or more in order to create two additional parking bays at the top end of the driveway. Right now, the way the bays are aligned, they would interfere with any parking at the top end of the driveway. And that would pull them further from the existing mature trees that are out there, because the lot appears to be clearer out front than it is deeper in. Without getting too far forward where you're parking on the road and it's your neighbor's problem too.
So to the east.
To the east,
Okay.
10, 15 feet, whatever it takes to create usable space for two parking stalls at the top end of the driveway.
Right, because I'd hate to see those trees cut down with two parking spots that right now aren't even being utilized. Because,
But if this applicant sells the property and the next owner utilizes it and we didn't exercise this opportunity to build those parking spaces, right now maybe the two people or the one person who occupies that space doesn't have a
no, I'm in agreement of the
no.
need, of the necessity. I understand both from the planning purview as well as our understanding of it, that it's necessary. I would just, it supports what you stated, that find a way to move it,
to lessen the impacts.
Right, to lessen or minimize the impact to it being right in the front lawn of the property that, is visible to neighbors, but further enough away from, where the tree is, that the tree doesn't need to be removed. So,
And it's clear that these are suggestions to the planning board and not directions of this board.
That's correct.
So, Mike, you're suggesting sliding this east, south, yes, to the southeast
So
here?
they could park in the,
Yeah, slide it down here.
Yeah, if we
We're
were
not
to take
talking
a
about putting it
20
over
foot-
here, because then it'd be the front yard, right?
Yeah, if we were to take a 20-foot dimension and put it at the top end of that driveway, you'd be blocking those two spots.
Right.
Right, so if you slide those two spots
Put 'em down here
10,
somewhere.
15 feet maybe,
Right.
then you create two parking spaces up top, plus the two new ones, and you don't push it so far that it gets too close to the road that it becomes your neighbor's parking lot.
Okay.
Seems like a good idea.
All right.
Do we want to make a suggestion about the type of
The
material?
Yeah,
to
the
as well?
permeable pavements also.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's two recommendations. Shifting the new parking 10 to 15 feet to the east so that they may utilize the dead-end driveway for additional parking. And also consider the use of permeable pavement for the additional 400 square foot of parking area being paved.
Or various types of pervious pavement.
various types of
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that we have an option,
pervious
whether
cover.
it's block, pavement, et cetera.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I guess, ready for a vote?
So was that a motion made by Seth with all this stuff on it? Because you lost me halfway through what we went through here.
Well, I think we have a motion on the floor, just to recap, a motion to grant the 2 minor variances being sought
And that started by Seth.
by Seth, with 2 recommendations to the planning board to consider, A, moving the new parking spaces 10 to 15 feet to the east, and B, to consider permeable pavement surfaces to reduce the impacts of runoff and enhance
Right.
Now I
ground.
need a second.
Right, but to clarify that, like, if it's not necessary, if the trees don't need to be removed to accommodate that spot, I'd rather keep it how it's proposed on the plan, because it's as far back away from the street and the other, the
But-
view as possible. I mean, I didn't measure, I didn't walk off where those trees currently are. Again, you comment on it, I might think thinking too far into it.
I would just caution you about stepping on the toes of another
Right.
board. As far as planning, if that's their purview, really, the planning board's purview is to indicate how the site plan is to be arranged.
This is true.
The zoning board is basically relaxing the requirements of the code so that people can build. So I just don't want to
No.
put in our resolution what they have to do relative to a site plan.
Right, yeah. Just
Suggestions are fine.
recommendations, well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's some photographs of the site. If anybody hasn't been out there, they want to see it.
It's just out there.
They're further back, I think.
Yeah, they look like they're close to the shed, the big trees. So you may end up saving some trees by pulling it a little forward.
Right.
Did we put that in the recommendation for the purpose of saving the,
Make an effort to
Yeah, I mean,
save the
that's
existing
the main,
trees.
that's the main reason.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah,
right. But all
I'm a
within.
tree hugger, that's not a
The
problem.
Lorax.
So's Bonnie.
Might it be
Okay.
cheaper?
Save trees.
Okay, so
I'm sure
I
she's evaluating that.
think that all that language captures our motion for an approval on the 2 variances and our 3 recommendations to the town board, our planning board.
I'll second that.
Was that you, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Well, thank you, David. I believe we hashed it out and we got through this all in one piece.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It was a good discussion, good recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next
Yeah, what's up next
I'm
month?
trying to make them easier as we go along, but we'll get there. Have a good evening.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, David.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
What do you mean, I'm not gonna see you again this month? Come on, no, Thursday,
Thursday.
3:30.
And we will be ready.
Okay. Sorry,
Okay.
that's for my planning board.
With the completion of that application, would anybody like to make a motion to close the the ZBA meeting?
No.
meeting.
Minutes?
Got minutes from,
Just in November.
Okay.
There's not much, they're easy, except I already lost my copies.
Did you guys?
Okay. January minutes.
No,
So are we just looking at?
no, I got that
I
feeling.
did,
The January minutes?
well, I realized November's were never approved, so I brought them with me. They're not on the agenda, but they can be added.
Okay, so let's start with the November.
Okay, that's fine.
Bu- 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 bu.
Those are the ones that, they didn't get emailed out, but I brought them.
So November 27th, 2018, members present, Rob O'Neill, Seth Bader, Michael Murphy, Peter Lewis. So we have a quorum to
Right, well,
review and
Kevin will abstain from this one. He wasn't even on the board.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys want to take a couple of minutes to read the November 27th minutes? Yeah, so the first item was that,
That was that,
that driveway that we were talking about on Park, Round Lake Park Avenue. Zoning issues with SR 15.
Man, that was just accepting minutes. That was easy.
So on that new business though, with the pavers, we basically said he's gotta come back with
Other
more
options.
information. Is that captured here? I don't think, I mean,
Well, there
should-
was zoning issues with SR 15. Are there any other variances on the property you questioned?
Yeah,
And the lot coverage was high, so he needed to come back with,
right,
and they haven't been back. I haven't even talked to them.
okay.
So they're still in violation of
Right.
the building department.
Right, this
I just didn't know if we had to say, they were gonna.
zoning issues, are there any other variances? We did ask them to look at ways to mitigate for the impervious area that's already
Okay.
been
I
paved
can
out
add
there.
it.
Okay, so they haven't been back, and that was December, January, February. We may not see them back.
Well, eventually they're gonna have to,
Yeah.
because they're gonna get another note from the board, from
Mhm.
the building department.
Okay, and then item 3 was minutes. So it was really just that one item
Mhm.
that was
Right.
on there, and I think that
Yep, very brief meeting as the acting chair.
So, make a motion to approve the minutes as amended? I mean,
Yeah, as
like,
amended by me adding that comment.
Okay, I make that motion. I make that movement, I make that motion.
anybody second it?
One second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved.
Kevin,
I abstain.
thank you. You have to state that.
I didn't say that last time.
Okay, the next set of minutes for review are the January 22nd, 2019 minutes, and we were all present for that meeting. So we can read through that and note if you have any comments.
We approve Seth as the acting.
We approve the meeting schedule, referral. So then this was the application that was just before us.
We just did, yeah. We approved what?
Additional rooms. Public hearing. Minutes. Any discussion or any questions of the matters that were before the ZBA last month? I think we had a number of administrative motions at the beginning of the meeting, kicking off the new year. Then we had the one action that we had earlier tonight, that was the Gomez application. And then we had approved a series of other meeting minutes. Any questions or comments?
Nope.
Anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
You were
No,
here
no,
last
Kevin,
month.
you were here
That
for
was for
this.
January.
January 22. 2019.
So change it to, yes.
Aye, yes, I changed to yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I got
Now we
it
need
now.
a motion to adjourn.
Let Kevin do it. He's very trigger happy.
I'm making a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. With that, I thank you all for the February ZBA meeting, and if you have a couple of minutes, I'd just like to talk to us about some administrative matters that are, beyond the meeting.